Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. With no other choice, we turn to the most feared species. Humans. The Galactic Union's Grand Council Hall stood in eerie silence. It was a vast chamber built to house the most powerful leaders of the known universe, but one seat had always remained empty. It was a seat reserved for a species long erased from history, a species the Union had once feared. Now, as the Council gathered in urgent session, that seat still remained unfilled. But its absence carried a weight heavier than ever before. The crisis had reached its peak, worlds burned, fleets shattered, an enemy more ruthless than any before had emerged from the void, carving a path of destruction across the galaxy. Filary, their warships had torn through every defense, their soldiers leaving nothing but ruin in their wake. The Union's greatest minds had devised strategies, countermeasures, and last-ditch efforts, none of them had worked. And now the Council sat in desperate silence, searching for a solution that did not exist. "This is the end," the voice of High Chancellor Vora trembled as she spoke. "We have lost." Murmurs spread through the hall, no one dared to argue. But then a single voice cut through the despair: "There is one option left." All eyes turned to Grand Minister Kaus, an elder among the Union. His scales dulled with age, his voice carrying hesitation as if he feared his own words. Vora narrowed her eyes. "There is no fleet strong enough, no weapon powerful enough to stop them." "What are you suggesting?" Kaus inhaled slowly. "A call for aid." Laughter erupted from some members of the council, others scoffed in disbelief. "A call for aid," barked Xandra General, "to whom we have already pleaded with every known civilization. No one dares to stand against Thari." Kaus closed his eyes. "Not every civilization." Silence returned. A cold chill filled the chamber. "No," Vora said, shaking her head. "That is not an option." Kaus opened his eyes, his gaze sharp. "Would you rather face extinction?" Vora's mandibles clenched, but she said nothing. "They were erased for a reason." Another council member muttered, "We cannot bring them back." "They were erased because we feared them," Kais countered. "Because we could not control them." Another long silence followed. Vora's voice was barely a whisper. "Humans." The name itself seemed to make the air in the chamber grow heavier. Long ago, humans had been part of the Galactic Union, but they had never been like the others. They thought differently, fought differently, they did not obey. And when their presence became too unsettling, the Council made a decision. They were erased from records, disconnected from galactic society, forgotten. Or so the Union had thought. "If they are still out there," Kaus continued, "they may be our only hope." Vora exhaled slowly. "And if they are not?" Kaus did not answer, because deep down they all knew the truth: if humanity was gone, the Union was doomed. The chamber fell into heated debate, arguments rising and falling, but in the end the choice was clear. A transmission was sent, a final desperate message across the void, through an ancient relay station long thought abandoned, flickering to life. And then a response came, a human voice. The transmission had been sent into the void, a desperate call thrown into the unknown, and against all expectations, someone had answered. The Grand Council chamber was deathly silent as the message played. A voice, deep and calm, filled the room. "You finally remembered us." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. There was no name, no identification, just a voice that carried the weight of something ancient and dangerous. Vora's mandibles clicked together nervously. "Who? Who are we speaking to?" A brief pause ensued. Then the voice responded, "Someone who remembers." Kaus leaned forward. "Are you human?" A soft chuckle followed. "And if I am?" Vora's grip tightened on the edge of her seat. "The Galactic Union is under attack. We seek your aid." Another silence followed. "Then you seek our aid," the voice repeated slowly. After everything. A few council members shifted uncomfortably. The human continued, you cast us out, wiped our existence from history, banished us from your sight. Cows inhaled sharply. That is true, but when your empires burn, when your fleets crumble, you call for us. No one dared to speak. A quiet hum filled the transmission. It was not static, it was thinking, considering. Finally, the voice spoke again. Very well. Cows blinked. You will help us. The response was almost amused. I never said that. Vora's heart pounded in her chest. Then what do you mean? I mean, the voice said, that I want to see it for myself. A new set of coordinates appeared on the transmission display. Meet me here, the voice instructed. Come alone, no fleets, no tricks. Vora hesitated. And if we don't? Then you already have your answer. The transmission cut off. For several long moments, the council sat in stunned silence, then an uproar erupted. This is madness, shouted Alexander, General. We cannot trust them. It could be a trap, another council member added. Cows stood. What choice do we have? Vora's eyes remained fixed on the darkened screen where the transmission had played. I will go. The room fell into silence. Cows turned to her. Chancellor, you can't, I will go, she repeated firmly. I sent the call. I will answer it. The coordinates were set, a lone vessel was prepared. And as Vora stepped onto the ship, she could not shake the feeling that she was walking into something far bigger than she had ever imagined, something old, something human. Vora sat alone in the dimly lit cockpit of her personal transport. The stars outside stretched endlessly, a silent void that had swallowed countless civilizations before hers. She had traveled far beyond the borders of the Galactic Union to a place no official records acknowledged. The coordinates led to an uncharted system orbiting a dying red star. As her ship neared the location, her sensors registered a single object, an ancient space station floating in the void. It was massive, far larger than anything the Union had built, yet its surface was scarred, weathered by time. She hesitated before sending out a signal. This is Chancellor Vora of the Galactic Union. I have come as requested. Silence, then a reply, dock at the main hangar. Vora's mandibles tightened. No security checks, no weapon scans. Whoever this was, they either trusted me completely or didn't see me as a threat. The docking process was smooth. As her ship settled into the hangar, she saw no welcoming party, no guards, just the faint hum of life support systems keeping this forgotten station alive. She stepped out, her claws clicking against the metal floor. A single figure stood at the far end of the hangar waiting. Human. Vora had seen images of their kind in ancient records, always grainy, always distant, as if even the recordings had tried to forget them. But this one was different. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in a long dark coat that looked older than the station itself. His face was lined with years of experience, but his eyes held something that sent a chill down Vora's spine. They held memory. She approached cautiously. Are you the one who answered? The human studied her for a long moment before responding, I am. His voice was the same, calm, steady, unreadable. Vora forced herself to stand tall. Then tell me, will you help us? A small, humorless smile played at the corner of his lips. That depends. He exhaled sharply. On what? He stepped closer, his presence alone making the room feel smaller, as if questioning whether I deserve to be saved. Vora's heart pounded. We are at war. Our people are dying. If you, the human raised a hand, silencing her. I know. He turned, walking toward the hangar's exit. Come with me, he said. I want to show you something. Hesitation flickered in her mind, but she had come this far. She followed. The station was old. Its halls were lined with markings she didn't recognize, symbols of a forgotten era. As they walked, the human spoke, "Your kind abandoned us long ago, banished us to the void. You called us dangerous, unpredictable, a threat to the balance of the galaxy. That was before my time, I had no part in it," Vora managed. He stopped suddenly, turning to face her. "And yet here you are asking for our help." She held his gaze. "Because we have no choice." The human studied her, then nodded as if he had expected that answer. They reached a massive viewing window. Beyond it, floating in the darkness, was something that made Vora's breath catch in her throat. Ships. Not just any ships, human warships. Hundreds of them, silent, waiting. Their dark hulls bore no insignia, no allegiance, only scars from battles long past. They had been here for centuries, hidden, forgotten, yet still ready. Vora's voice barely came out. You still have a fleet?" The human turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "We never left." For the first time since she had arrived, fear crept into Vora's mind, not of the war that awaited her people, but of the force they had abandoned, and whether humanity would choose to help them at all. Vora couldn't take her eyes off the ships. They were unlike anything she had ever seen, massive, angular, and built for war. Even after centuries of isolation, they looked alive, as if waiting for a command that had never come. Her breath was shallow. This changes everything." The human beside her, still nameless, watched her carefully. "You didn't know, did you?" he said. "You thought we disappeared." Vora forced herself to speak. The record said humans were gone, that they were no longer a threat. The man's expression remained neutral, but there was something cold in his eyes. "They wanted us gone," he corrected. "So they erased us." Vora felt a chill run down her spine. The Galactic Union had always taught that humanity was dangerous, uncontrollable, that they had been given a choice, peaceful exile or total destruction. According to history, they had chosen exile and then vanished. But now she saw the truth. They hadn't vanished, they had waited. The human turned away from the viewport, motioning for her to follow. "Come." Vora hesitated, then forced her legs to move. They walked through the station in silence. The halls were worn but functional, dimly lit by emergency lights. There were no signs of other humans, only the quiet hum of ancient machinery keeping the place running. Finally, they entered a large chamber, a war room. Holographic maps flickered to life, displaying the galaxy, battlefronts, fleet movements, occupied worlds, information she had never shared, now laid out in perfect detail. Vora's chest tightened. "How do you have this?" The human sat down at the console, fingers tapping on the controls. "Your enemies have been watching you," he gestured to one of the displays. "So we watched them." The realization hit her hard. The humans had been observing the war, studying, learning, waiting. Vora swallowed. "Then you know how desperate we are." The human leaned back, folding his arms. "I do." She stepped forward. "Then help us. Fight with us." Silence stretched between them. Then the human shook his head. "No." Vora's heart pounded. "What?" He stood, staring at her with an intensity that made her feel small. "You think you can call us when it's convenient, when you're losing? Where was the Galactic Union when we needed help?" Vora had no answer. The human stepped closer. "Your people exiled us, feared us, hunted us, and now you come here expecting us to save you." He let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "Tell me, Chancellor, why should we?" Her throat went dry. She knew what he was saying was true, the Union had left humanity to die. And now humanity had the power to decide their fate. Vora forced herself to meet his gaze. "Because this war will destroy everything, even you." The human studied her for a long moment, then he sighed, "Perhaps." He turned away, staring at the galaxy map. Then, without looking at her, he spoke again, "There is only one way, we fight." Vora felt hope rise in her chest. "Name it." The human's voice was quiet. "We don't fight for you." He turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "We fight as humanity." And in that moment, Vora understood, if the Union wanted humanity's help, they would have to earn it. Vora had expected resistance. She had expected anger, hesitation, even resentment. She had not expected this. The human's words echoed in her mind, "We don't fight for you. We fight as humanity." She studied him, trying to understand. "What does that mean?" The human didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved to the war table, tapping on the flickering holographic display. A new image appeared, an old emblem, one she had only seen in ancient records. A flag. A human flag. Vora swallowed hard. "You want the Union to submit to you?" The human chuckled, shaking his head. "Submit? No, but if we fight, it's on our terms." His voice turned sharp. "No chains, no oversight, no one telling us what we can and can't do." Vora's hands clenched. "You're asking for independence." He met her gaze. "We were never part of your Union." She had no argument against that. The Galactic Union had cast humanity aside long ago, treating them as an unstable force too dangerous to be trusted. They had expected humanity to disappear into history, but history had a way of remembering. She took a slow breath. "If I take this offer to the Council, they will refuse." The human smirked. "Then you'll lose your war." The cold certainty in his voice sent a shiver through her, because he wasn't frightening her, he was stating a fact. Vora forced herself to focus. What would humanity's war look like? For a moment, the human said nothing. Then he turned to the holographic display. With a single tap, the galactic map shifted. Red markers appeared across enemy-controlled worlds, fleets, strongholds, supply lines, every critical point of the war. Then, one by one, those markers disappeared. Vora's breath caught. The human looked at her. "This war drags on because you fight by rules," his voice was quiet yet filled with steel. "We don't." Vora watched as the holographic map played out simulated battles unlike anything the Union had ever considered, sudden, precise, brutal eliminations, stealth assaults deep in enemy space, infrastructure crippled before reinforcements could even be called, entire fleets wiped out in a span of hours without warning or mercy, a war fought not for control, but for victory. Vora exhaled slowly. "You could really do this." The human leaned forward. "We already have plans." Her mind raced. The Union had been fighting this war for years, struggling to hold the line, losing more than they gained, but humanity had been waiting. Vora straightened. "If I take this offer to the Council, they must know what it means." The human nodded. "If they agree, humanity fights as an independent power, not as soldiers of the Union, but as our own force." He paused. "And when the war is over, we owe you nothing." Vora hesitated. The Council would never accept this, but if she refused, they would lose. She took a deep breath. "I will deliver your terms." The human studied her, then gave a single nod. "Then let's see if your people want to win." The council chamber was silent, not the silence of peace, but the silence of fear. Vora stood before them, the weight of their decision pressing down on her. The holographic display beside her flickered with the strategic plans humanity had revealed, each red marker, the locations of enemy strongholds, fleet formations, hidden supply depots, vanished one by one as the simulated human strikes played out, total devastation, no prolonged battles, no drawn-out campaigns, just swift, overwhelming annihilation. She turned to the council members. "You have seen what they can do." No one spoke, some of them couldn't even meet her eyes. The Supreme Speaker, a frail but sharp-eyed being from the Velterary species, finally broke the silence. These humans, they would destroy everything. Vora hesitated, then nodded. Yes, they will fight as they always have, with no hesitation, with no mercy. The speaker's mouth tightened. And they demand complete autonomy. Another council member, a reptilian named Iskar, hissed in frustration, they are warmongers. They want to be let loose. And once the war is over, how do we stop them? A murmur of agreement swept through the chamber. Vora's jaw clenched. You don't, she continued steadily, that's the price. We cast them aside centuries ago, left them to survive on the fringes of known space, and they did, alone. She took a step forward. Now we face extinction. We have begged, we have pleaded, we have thrown everything we have into this war, and we are still losing. Her voice turned sharp. But humans, they win. A heavy silence followed, then another counselor, old and weary, whispered, and if we refuse? Vora's gaze swept across them. Then prepare for surrender. Because without them, we have nothing left. The council chamber descended into chaos. Some shouted that humanity was a greater threat than their enemy, others argued that they had no choice. Voices rose in heated debate, accusations thrown back and forth. But Vora already knew the truth, the council had lost this war. Humanity would win it, and in doing so, they would change everything. The fleet arrived without warning. No grand declarations, no diplomatic gestures, just warships, massive, silent, and bristling with weapons unlike anything the Galactic Union had ever seen. Vora stood on the command deck of the Union's flagship, staring at the display as human vessels phased into real space. The sheer precision of their formation was terrifying, every ship locked into position as if they had rehearsed this 1,000 times. The main view screen flickered to life. A single human stood before them, clad in an unmarked black uniform, no medals, no insignia, only cold, calculating eyes. This war ends now, the human said. The Supreme Speaker hesitated. You know what we face, we know, the human interrupted, and we don't care about your politics, your treaties, your fears. His gaze swept over them. We were given one condition, total operational control. You agreed. That means you don't question our methods. Vora's stomach twisted. This was what she had fought for, what she had argued for. But now, staring at them, she understood, humans did not fight wars, they ended them. The Supreme Speaker swallowed. What do you require? The human's expression remained unreadable. All available data on the enemy, every intelligence file, every battle record, every classified document. The speaker hesitated. The human leaned forward. You called for us. Now let us do what we do best. The speaker gave a slow nod. Very well. Vora exhaled. It had begun. The battle was over, not in days, not in weeks, but in hours. The enemy fleet, once an unstoppable force, was now nothing more than scattered debris drifting through the void. Their war engines, their mighty dreadnoughts, gone, obliterated. The humans had moved with ruthless efficiency, tearing through enemy formations with a precision that defied logic. Vora stood among the surviving Union leaders on the command deck, her hands trembling. They had won, but at what cost? The main view screen flickered again. The human commander appeared, his uniform as unmarked as before, his expression as unreadable as ever. It's done, he said simply. The Supreme Speaker took a cautious breath. On behalf of the Galactic Union, we, the human raised a hand, spare us the gratitude. His voice was cold. Final. You called us when you had no other options, we answered. Now we're done. Vora stepped forward, but the Union would need to rebuild. We need allies. The human's gaze locked onto her, and she felt the weight of centuries in his stare. We are not your allies. Silence filled the chamber. The speaker's voice wavered. Then what are you? The human exhaled, shaking his head. A warning. Without another word, the transmission cut off. Moments later, the human fleet disappeared, vanishing into the void as if they had never been there at all. And in their absence, a single truth remained: the seat at the Galactic Union's table, the one meant for humanity, would remain forever.